I paid off their debt quietly, without ever telling anyone. On Mother's Day, my daughter-in-law gifted me a bag of expired canned goods and a used blanket. She didn't notice that the letter I placed in her glove box that morning was already missing. I haven't told this to anyone in real life. Not my friends, not my son, not even my late husband's sister, who I talk to almost every week. I've kept it bottled up for a long time, and maybe writing it out here will help me make sense of how stupid I feel for trying to do the right thing. Last year, I found out my son and his wife were in deep financial trouble. Not just the usual credit card stuff. This was serious. I accidentally saw a letter from a collections agency in their mailbox while I was helping watch the kids. The envelope was already opened, and curiosity got the better of me. What I read made my stomach turn. They were over $47,000 in debt. Collections. Overdue car payments. Credit lines defaulted. And yet on social media, they looked like they were living the dream: theme park trips, new patio furniture, name-brand clothes for the kids. Every post said, #blessed. It tore me up inside. My son, David, has always had pride issues. He's the type who'd rather suffer in silence than admit he needs help. And Megan, my daughter-in-law, she's always seemed more focused on appearances than reality. But still, I couldn't stand by and watch them sink while pretending they were floating. So, I made a choice. I started paying it off. Quietly. Behind the scenes. I work part-time at a small law office doing bookkeeping and document prep. I've been there almost 20 years, and I know how to find information. I contacted the creditors directly. I negotiated down some of the balances. Every payment came from a savings account they didn't know I had, one I built after my husband passed. Ron always said, "Be ready. Life doesn't warn you when it hits." He was right. I didn't tell them. I didn't want them to feel small or embarrassed. I just wanted to fix it, quietly as a mother. I kept a spreadsheet. Every dollar, every date. I wanted to believe they'd feel the weight lift and turn things around. Maybe they'd even thank me someday, without knowing why. But the months passed, and instead of getting better, they got worse. They didn't change anything. They just stopped hiding. Megan quit her side job. David started talking about upgrading their SUV. They weren't budgeting or cutting back. They were spending like the slate had been wiped clean. Because it had. They just didn't know who did it. Then came Mother's Day. They invited me over for brunch. I brought a pie, helped set the table, made polite conversation. I even brought small toys for the kids. I wasn't expecting anything. Truthfully, I wasn't. But when Megan handed me a gift bag, I could feel something was off. The bag was crumpled and light. I opened it at the table. Inside were 6 old, dented cans of soup. Every single one expired. And a used fleece blanket that smelled faintly of dog and old detergent. I smiled. I said thank you. But inside I went cold. Not because I wanted a fancy gift. Not because I needed anything. But because that gift told me exactly what I meant to them. I had paid off their future, and they gave me their trash. After we ate, while they were cleaning up, I went out to my car. I had written a letter that morning, printed it, and sealed it in a plain envelope. No name, no return address. I slipped it into Megan's glove box, right on top of her insurance papers. It read, "You were bailed out. Every dime. Quietly. Carefully. Out of love." That love deserved respect. Instead, I got expired soup and dog hair. I hope this helps you understand what you threw away. I didn't expect a thank you. But I wanted them to know someone had seen everything, paid everything, and expected dignity in return. After dessert, I made an excuse and went back out to grab my sunglasses. I checked the glove box. The letter was gone. Someone had already seen it. I don't know if it was David or Megan. They didn't say a word to me the rest of the afternoon. I kissed my grandkids goodbye and drove home with a smile that didn't touch my heart. What they don't know is that I didn't just keep a spreadsheet. I kept signed receipts, screenshots of every wire transfer, notes from every creditor who closed the accounts early because of me. I have a file an inch thick, all legal and time-stamped. They don't know I froze their ability to reopen some of the accounts by calling the agencies and flagging unusual activity. They don't know I spoke to someone at the bank where Megan tried to apply for a new credit card last month. They don't know how many options I still have. I tried to help out of love. But they thought I was stupid. They thought I'd always be quiet, always be available, always be grateful just to be tolerated. They were wrong. I'm not done. Not yet. After Mother's Day, I didn't say anything. I didn't text. Didn't call. I didn't even respond to Megan's passive-aggressive Facebook post a few days later that said, "Some people just can't be happy unless they're playing victim." She didn't tag anyone, but she knew what she was doing. So did I. I stopped offering to babysit. I stopped dropping off groceries. I stopped being the one who kept the peace. A week went by. Then 2. Finally, David called me. "Hey, haven't heard from you," he said, like nothing was wrong. "Megan's been wondering if you're okay." I wanted to laugh. I said I'd been fine, just taking care of a few things. He didn't press. Then, the real trouble started. Around mid-June, I got a call from someone at their bank. They know me personally, small town, familiar names. They'd seen Megan try to open a new joint account in her name and David's, but something flagged it. A fraud alert. It was the freeze I'd placed months ago, back when I was paying off everything. I had done it as a precaution, to prevent identity theft and more reckless borrowing. At the time, I thought it was a kindness. Now, it was a trigger. I told the banker to leave the freeze in place. A few days later, David called again, but this time his voice was sharp. "Did you do something with Megan's credit?" he asked. "She can't get approved for anything." I paused, then said, "I protected it." "You what?" "I protected it. When I cleaned up the mess." There was silence. "What mess?" he asked, but he already knew. I could hear it in his voice. "You know what mess. $47,000 of it. All gone. Paid. Quietly. By me." I could hear Megan in the background. She was yelling. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught invasion, control, and manipulative. Then David said the one thing that broke the last bit of peace in me. "We didn't ask you to do that." That was it. That was the line. Not "thank you." Not "we didn't know." Just cold, entitled dismissal. Like I was a repairman they never called but still blamed for touching their broken sink. I hung up. The next day, Megan posted a long message on Facebook about narcissistic elders who weaponize money to control younger generations. People commented things like "sending love" and "toxic parents are the worst." A few even said she was brave for speaking her truth. And still I said nothing. But I started preparing. First, I contacted a lawyer I trust. I asked her about the legality of what I'd done and what could come next. She assured me I was covered. I had receipts, call logs, wire confirmations. It was all traceable to me and all authorized. I had paid the debt. I hadn't impersonated anyone. I hadn't used their information without cause. I'd protected them from themselves. Then I started putting together the package. A file for David. A file for Megan. Copies of every payment, every transaction. The emails I'd sent to creditors. The notes I'd made about the freeze. Even screenshots of their social media posts from the same time they were supposedly struggling. And I sent one to Megan's mother. She'd always looked down on me. Always made comments about my small house, or how I still work at my age. She didn't know her perfect daughter had been financially drowning while wearing $1,000 handbags. She didn't know I'd saved them. She knows now. The next day, Megan showed up at my house. No warning. No call. She banged on the door like she was collecting a debt. "You had no right," she shouted as soon as I opened it. "No right to pay off your debt?" I said. "Come." "No right to go behind our backs and tell my mother?" "Then maybe you should have gone behind your own back and told her you were broke." She was shaking with rage. I didn't care. "You made us look like beggars. You did that yourselves." She left in tears. Not because of guilt, because her image was cracked. I knew things were going to get worse before they got better. But I was done playing the doormat. They wanted to treat me like a silent, disposable old woman. They forgot where their lifeline came from. After Megan stormed off, I didn't hear from either of them for 3 weeks. No calls, no texts. I figured the message had finally landed, and they were licking their wounds. I was wrong. One evening, I got a call from my neighbor, Judy. She lives across the street and has known me since Ron and I bought this house 30 years ago. She said, "I don't mean to stir anything, but I saw a man taking pictures of your house today. He walked around your yard like he owned the place." I froze. "What did he look like?" I asked. She described him. Early 30s. Business casual. Drove a black Lexus. The next day, I found a card in my mailbox, no envelope, just tucked into the flap. It was from a real estate agent. "Interested in selling? Your property has potential. Let's talk." I never called that agent. Never reached out. Never listed my home. I started looking into recent activity with my property record. Sure enough, someone had pulled my title report. That's not illegal, it's public info, but it's not something people do without a reason. That's when I remembered something. David still had a copy of my old trust paperwork. Years ago, when Ron and I were updating our will, we'd named David as a temporary medical and financial power of attorney. It had long since expired, but I hadn't updated every document. Some records still had his name on file. They were trying to see what I owned, not just out of curiosity, but likely planning how to challenge it. I went back to the lawyer and had everything redone. Trust, will, power of attorney, all of it. Megan and David were removed completely. If something happens to me now, every cent goes to my granddaughter's college fund, and the rest to a shelter Ron and I used to support. But that wasn't the only thing I found out. The bank manager I mentioned earlier? He called me a few days after the house incident. Told me, off the record, that Megan had come in again, this time trying to access an old joint CD she believed David's name was on. It wasn't. It was mine and Ron's. Untouched. She left empty-handed. But the pattern was clear. They were scrambling. Not just angry, they were desperate. And then came the final twist. A week later, I got a notice in the mail from CPS. Child Protective Services. An anonymous complaint had been filed against me, alleging neglect. That I'd left my grandkids unattended in my home with unsafe conditions, specifically rotting food and excessive medication within reach. I sat there holding that letter, and I swear I felt something leave my body. Like the last bit of illusion that blood meant loyalty. It was a lie. Every word. I don't even keep prescription meds in the open. My home is cleaner than Megan's has ever been. But I knew what this was. They were trying to destroy me. Reputationally, legally, personally. They wanted to erase the evidence of my help, rewrite the story, and cast me as the villain. But I was ready now. They'd taken my silence for weakness, my kindness for stupidity. They were about to find out what I really had in that file folder, and what I was about to do with it. The CPS case didn't go anywhere. The investigator was polite but thorough. She walked through my home, looked at my pantry, even checked the medicine cabinet. At the end of the visit, she said softly, "This seems retaliatory." I didn't ask how many other people had gotten visits like this. I already knew. But that visit lit the final fire in me. I'd been patient, careful. I gave them every chance to do the right thing. I protected them when they were drowning. I kept my mouth shut while they took and never said thank you. But they tried to destroy me. So I made my final move. First, I contacted a friend of Ron's, an old friend from our church, now a CPA who does investigative work on the side. I gave him the file. Every transaction, every note, every screenshot. I asked him to draft a full audit, showing exactly how I cleaned up David and Megan's debt, and what they did afterward. He put together a 48-page report, complete with timelines, photos, and social media activity that showed their spending spree after I paid off their accounts. Then I mailed it to Megan's parents, to David's 2 closest friends, to the HR department where Megan worked, to the family court where they had a pending custody mediation with Megan's ex over her son from a prior relationship. But most importantly, I made sure a copy landed in the hands of a local family attorney I know personally, one who'd been burned once by Megan's truth-bending. I didn't ask him to take legal action. I just asked him to review the file. He did more than review it. He passed it to a friend of his in fraud prevention at the county level. From there, it reached a former judge who now sat on a financial ethics board. Megan and David weren't charged with anything because I hadn't done anything illegal and they'd never gotten their hands on my assets, but their names were flagged. Their credit accounts were watched. Their tax returns were reviewed. Quietly. I didn't want to ruin them with noise. I wanted silence. And it worked. A few weeks later, Megan was removed from her job. They called it downsizing, but I heard from someone inside the company that they didn't like the attention she brought after the report surfaced. David called me once. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't even say hello. All he said was, "You win. I hope you're happy." He still didn't get it. It wasn't about winning. It was about truth. He chose to protect a woman who lied, manipulated, and tried to ruin his own mother's name. He allowed her to weaponize my love against me. That has consequences. The last thing I did? I drafted one more letter. To my granddaughter. She's 10 now. I don't know what she'll think of me when she's older. I don't know what stories they'll tell her. But I told her my truth, in plain language. I told her I loved her and I always tried to do the right thing, even when it cost me. I put the letter in my safety deposit box along with every document that proves it. She'll get it when she's 18. They tried to use my silence as a weapon, but in the end, it was my silence that buried them. And I'm finally at peace.